Hello, my name is Jacqueline Goldfinger, and I'm the playwright for Backwards, Forwards, Back. I started writing very young. I used to draw pictures to tell stories, like before I could actually write. And I would make my mom write words above them, like what was going on in the pictures, which she hated. She's like, I was so ready for you to learn to write. She was working 2 jobs. She was very, very busy.
Right.
But always I had this fascination with images and language and coming together in different ways. So when I was like in elementary school and middle school, I wrote a lot of short stories and poems. Um, and then soon in middle school, my short stories became less and less description and more just the dialogue between different characters. And my middle school English teacher was like, "You're not actually writing a short story anymore. You're writing this thing called a play."
Right.
And so I grew up in rural North Florida near Tallahassee, and not a big theater scene there. So I learned a lot about playwriting through reading plays at the library. And I was really lucky that in high school we got a drama teacher for my last couple years in high school. And she was the one who really introduced me to performance and how words work differently 3D on stage than they work on the page.
Right.
So I'm really grateful for my teachers.
So it was something that sort of like morphed naturally. That's just how your writing emerged, was as dialogue and became plays, kind of.
Absolutely. And it wasn't a conscious choice that I know or remember. There's just something I find dialogue a lot more compelling, both to listen to and to write, than typical kind of narrative description.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. I so admire people who can write novels. I cannot imagine writing that many words in general, including description. I admire and love to read other forms of literature, but dialogue is just what makes sense in my head, and putting dialogue and motion together like we do in Backwards, Forwards, Back, where it's a one-person show, so there's a lot of them telling you the story, but a lot of the story is also in the silences. It's in how they move.
Right.
It's in which stories they choose to tell in what order that gives you the full sense of who they are and what their journey has become.
When did you first start working on Backwards, Forwards, Backwards?
2017, I read an article about virtual reality therapy for PTSD and veterans, and at the time it was experimental. But one of the big challenges about treating PTSD is that we don't have a lot of great tools. Talk therapy, people work very hard at. Medication can be prescribed. But really, the fact is that on the battlefield, their brains have literally been rewired by chemicals, right? The body wants to keep you alive. And so it changes whatever it needs to change in order to keep you physically alive. And that can also mean changing how your brain works, changing the connections in your brain and the brain chemistry, which affects all of your senses, it affects your perception, all of that. So while talk therapy is great and medication is great, for some soldiers it's just not enough. And so what VR does is it actually helps recalibrate your brain. So you're always going to have some symptoms of PTSD, right? Like, for example, one of the vets I interviewed was someone who dismantled IEDs when they were found on the road.
Okay.
So when he drives, like when he got home, if there was any piece of litter on the side of the road, because often IEDs were disguised as litter, any piece of litter he would flinch and immediately turn away from, because his body just thought it was an IED, right? It was just the immediate reaction that his brain had been taught.
Yeah.
And so what he could do with virtual, and medicine and talk therapy weren't working, but with virtual reality, he was able to actually practice driving. He was able to actually have incidents where he didn't swerve and learn what it felt like right before he had an episode, learn what coping skills he could employ, and basically rewire his brain and behavior so that now he can drive.
That's incredible.
It's amazing. And that's the thing, is I think a lot of people don't understand that PTSD is often like, it impacts every single daily occurrence for a lot of the vets. Right? It's not just a big fight and they see someone fighting and they flash back to battle. That can happen. But also it's things like you've been in a place where every piece of litter on the side of the road can kill you.
Mm-hmm.
So driving becomes a problem. So how do you get to work if you can't drive?
Yeah.
Right? Little things. I had a soldier tell me that because he spent so much time in Afghanistan and Iraq, and those uniforms are very muted tones and often khaki, and people attacking you would often wear muted tones or khaki colors, that when he got home, every time he saw his kid in their school uniform out of the side of his eye, he wanted to turn around and hit them. Not because he wanted to hit his kids,
Yeah.
but because that sense memory of, oh, I see that from the corner of my eye, they're about to shoot me, I have to attack first.
Right.
Just, he's like, it took him months and months.
How did you go about doing research for this and finding people whose stories you could learn from?
Well, I was very honored and to be able to talk to many vets who were willing to share their stories privately. I also, around 2017, when the articles were starting to come out about this experimental therapy, one of the reasons they were coming out is because doctors and vets were trying to rally support and advocate for more of these treatments being available. So at the time, a lot of people were giving interviews about them, which was wonderful. Today, as virtual reality therapy is used not only for PTSD, but a number of other mental wellness areas, more and more people are talking about it. You can now find videos on YouTube where they will take you through an entire VR treatment as an example, right? And so it's really, the information out there has blossomed. But early on, I was very lucky that a number of veterans entrusted me with their stories privately, which I could not have written this play without them.
Did you get the idea for this play from those veterans, or did you have the idea and then started to do some research?
So I got the initial idea from the article in 2017. A Marine named Jacqueline was brave enough to come forward, because also you have to remember that PTSD is considered a weakness, right? And as a soldier, you're trained, no weakness. Weakness equals bad. You're a bad person if you have this weakness.
Yeah.
So a lot of vets don't want to come forward for many reasons. It can be that, looking emotionally weak. It can also be they're worried that if their boss hears about it, or they're applying for jobs and someone hears they have PTSD, they'd be hesitant to hire them. Like, there's a lot of reasons to hide this condition.
Yeah.
And so Jimmy Castellanos was a Marine who was very brave and publicly came out and said, this is what I did. This works. I know it's not popular to say this among some of my population of vets, but we need more of this. And he did a big interview for MSNBC. And so I'm so grateful. I've never met him, but I always like to just say how grateful I am that he was brave enough to come forward, because his story became so primary in a lot of the coverage. Because no matter what a doctor tells you, the fact is, if you hear it from the actual person affected, it's more powerful.
Yeah.
So we're on version 8 of the current version of the script. Wow. So again, especially because this was a sensitive subject and a subject that had very real world implications, I really wanted to make sure I did my research well. I really wanted to make sure all the details in the script are up to current day practices, because in 2017, it was still considered experimental by some, so it has evolved a lot since then. So it's kind of constantly updating the script and deepening the character story and making sure that hopefully the script does more good than harm. We're giving people an evening of it is entertainment that is very satisfying, that you go through this character's journey where you start at hurt and trauma and you move towards hope and reuniting with his family. So we want it to be a powerful, satisfying story. But also, I'm really hoping that people will see this as a move towards advocacy, and then that will advocate in their own communities to support these kind of treatments and to more support of vets overall.
Yeah.
So a lot of I had the very general idea from the story from the beginning, but it's been a lot of fine tuning, changing monologues, making sure that what I have is true as it can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit just about what someone can expect when they come to see this show, and I guess just what it's about for someone who doesn't know anything?
Sure. So don't worry, you do not need any information to come into the show. You can come to the show with no information and be fine. Our show is about a soldier who recently came back from serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, has had a little bit of PTSD and a couple of, outbursts and panic attacks. And then one day he's visiting his family and he has a total PTSD break with reality, and he ends up severely hurting his nephew. And so then the play is about where he is and kind of the depth of his despair and his depression. And then he gets into VR therapy, and then it's moving from that despair, from a horrific act that he's so embarrassed and humiliated and hates that he committed and hates himself for committing, moving towards hope and reconciliation. At the end, he reconciles with his family and moves forward in a way where we have hope that the next phase of his life will be better. So we do start in a dark place, but we go to somewhere that we hope is very redemptive. And that is a story that we have. I mean, there's some humor. It's hard with stories that have so much emotional and dramatic heft that sometimes it becomes too much, and as audience members, we tune out.
Yeah.
So throughout the play, we do pepper it with loving family stories and moments of humor and moments of self-reflection, so that while it is a drama, you come through it hopefully with hope.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the director and your cast and just what the other members of the creative team have been like and what it's been like working with them?
I am so lucky. So Michaela who's directing the production, directed the reading for the Women Playwright series, and she is brilliant. And she cast Bess, who's a performer she's worked with for a while. And Bess has in the past also imbued characters based on real life figures. So I think that's been really useful.
Right.
But one of the things I love is that Michaela has gotten the entire creative team on board with this vision of the show that is incredibly dynamic, because it's and people move around the stage a lot. There are a lot of lighting cues, there are projections, because sometimes one person's shows can feel static.
Yeah.
And so she's just done beautiful work with the designers to make sure that it's as compelling and moving and visually exciting as a play with multiple characters.
Right.
Which I think is going to be great. And Bess is brilliant. I don't know if you got to see the reading last year.
I didn't. Yes, you said she was in the reading.
She was fantastic. And immediately when she was in the reading, Michaela and I were both like, and you're it! It does not always happen that way.
Yeah.
So it's lovely when it does. And one of the great things that Bess brings to the role is that she's great at instilling the gravity of the character while also finding the levels of humor and the layers of lightness, so that we really see a fully drawn dynamic soldier, which can be hard. I think this would be a role that would be very easy to just be angry all the time.
Yeah.
But that's not what's dramatically compelling.
Not three-dimensional. It's
not three-dimensional. It's also, we want to make sure that we show that soldiers with PTSD and vets with PTSD, they're dynamic, layered people. They're not a monolith.
Yeah.
So you want someone like Bess with that light touch that brings so many levels of nuance to the character.
Yeah.
So it's be an exciting show.
Yeah. What has it been like once you've written it and now you're working a little bit with the director and the actor, but in terms of your role after you've handed the script over to them, so to say?
So, great question. Often the playwright's role shifts with where the play is in its development. So, for example, this is the third production. So, when we had the actor in the first production, we actually added a whole other week of rehearsals. So we basically could workshop it. So we were changing the script a lot. And then we had the first production. It was like, oh, the audience got this. They didn't get that. This was unclear. We need to make sure that this through line is clearer, right? And so then revise, and the second production is stronger. And you guys are lucky because you're getting the third
Right,
production. So you're getting the production where the play is almost entirely done.
Yeah.
We've made some small changes, but hopefully this is what we'll go to press with in publication in the future.
Wow.
So I was there for more of the process earlier on, but that's just because those productions, there was more to do.
Right.
And so now it's really enjoyable. I get to come in for the first week, work with them on it, and then go away for a week or so and come back.
Mm-hmm.
In the future, once it gets published, often you're hands off.
Right.
So this is a nice place to be.
Yeah. You still get to have a little impact before
Yes.
it's full. They're going to take it and run with it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you talked a bit about trying to get more advocacy for soldiers to be able to talk about their own PTSD, for people to learn about this method. Is there anything else that you would want audiences to take away from the show?
Yes, I'd like them to take away the fact that while our vets are absolutely heroes, they also are people, and let them be people. I think one of the saddest things that I have heard people say is, oh, that vet was mean, or oh, that vet was X, Y, and Z, and so I don't want my tax dollars going to support them. And it's like, look, you put this person, good, bad, ugly, however you perceive them to be, you ask them to fight for you. You ask them to go and kill and possibly die for you. Whether or not you like them, the least we owe them is to support them in their journey when they come home.
Yeah.
And so I think it's hard sometimes when veterans don't quote unquote behave the way that people expect heroes to behave. But heroes are also people. And so I think part of what this play is doing, but I think a part of what further conversations that we're having across our nation now, is that, like, yes, there are heroes and they're also human. And we need to embrace all of that to help heal their humanity so they can all come back home.
Yeah. Is there a specific audience that you are trying to reach with this?
It's good question. I do always hope with a play like this to reach people who are socially engaged, just because these are the kind of people who end up calling their congressman after they see a play and being like, do we do this? Or I looked into this in my community and we don't. So that's great. But it is a general audience's play that even if you decide not to do anything, I hope that you have a full, satisfying, dramatic journey.
Yeah.
That you leave with not just more information in your pocket, but you leave having had this experience that can help you see the world in a slightly new way.
Yeah.
Which is what I think all great theater does. Whether it's Mamma Mia, or August Osage County, right? It's all about thinking and about the world in new ways, and that changes the way you see the world.